Have you ever noticed how the moment you stop chasing something, it suddenly starts chasing you? The job you desperately wanted but didn't get. And then, when you moved on, they called you back. The person who ignored you until you became indifferent, and suddenly they couldn't stay away. This isn't coincidence. This is one of the most powerful and terrifying psychological forces in human existence. And Arthur Schopenhauer, one of history's most brilliant philosophers, spent his entire life studying this paradox. What Schopenhauer discovered is both liberating and absolutely terrifying. He realized that the very act of wanting is what creates our suffering. Not the lack of what we want, but the wanting itself. And when you truly understand this, you unlock a power so profound that it can transform your entire existence. But be warned, once you see what I'm about to show you, you can never unsee it. Your relationship with everything you desire will change forever. We live in a world that tells us the opposite. Chase your dreams. Never give up. Want more, achieve more, become more. But Schopenhauer looked at this differently. He saw that human beings are trapped in what he called the will, an endless, insatiable force that drives us to want, to crave, to need. And this will, this constant state of wanting, is the root of all human suffering. Think about it. When was the last time you got something you desperately wanted and felt satisfied for more than a few days? Maybe a promotion, a relationship, a purchase you'd been dreaming about. You finally got it. And for a brief moment, there was joy. But then what happened? The joy faded, and almost immediately, your mind found something new to want. Schopenhauer called this the pendulum of existence. We swing between wanting what we don't have, which creates suffering, and having what we wanted, which creates boredom. We're never satisfied because the nature of the will is to always want more. But here's where it gets terrifying. Schopenhauer discovered there's a way out. Not through achieving everything you want, that's impossible, but through something far more radical. Through the complete cessation of wanting itself. Through becoming someone who genuinely wants nothing. And when you reach this state, you become free. Not free to get what you want, but free from wanting at all. And this freedom is the most terrifying force in human psychology because it makes you completely untouchable. Now, before you think this sounds like giving up, let me stop you. This is not about becoming passive. When you want nothing, you paradoxically gain everything. Not because the universe rewards you, but because your entire relationship with life transforms. You're no longer desperate. You're no longer controlled by external circumstances. And people feel this. Opportunities feel this. Life itself responds to this energy in ways that seem almost magical. So if you're ready to explore one of the most profound truths about human existence, and if you want philosophy that actually changes how you live, make sure you're subscribed because we're going into territory most people are too afraid to explore. Let's start with the foundation. Schopenhauer believed that at the core of all existence is the will to life. This isn't your personal will. This is a cosmic blind force that drives all living things. It's what makes your heart beat, what drives reproduction, competition, every impulse you've ever felt. And here's the disturbing part. This will has no purpose, no goal, no endpoint. It wants for the sake of wanting. You are not in control of this will. The will controls you. Every time you feel hungry, that's the will. Every time you feel lonely, that's the will. Every time you want success, validation, or love, that's the will using you as its vessel. And the will is never satisfied, because satisfaction would mean the end of wanting. This is why you can achieve everything you thought you wanted and still feel empty. The emptiness isn't about what you have. It's about the nature of wanting itself. Most people spend their entire lives as slaves to this will. They chase promotion after promotion. They jump from relationship to relationship. They accumulate possessions, achievements, experiences, always thinking that just a little bit more will finally be enough. But it never is, because they're trying to satisfy something that cannot be satisfied. The will doesn't want you to be happy. The will wants you to keep wanting. Now this sounds depressing, and Schopenhauer was called the philosopher of pessimism. But his pessimism wasn't the point. It was the diagnosis. He was showing you the disease so you could understand the cure. And the cure is seeing through the illusion of wanting itself. When you truly understand that wanting is suffering, not because you can't get what you want, but because the very act of wanting creates lack, something shifts. You stop fighting. You stop trying to satisfy the insatiable, and you start to access a different way of being. This is where the real power emerges. When you stop wanting from others, they feel it. When you stop needing validation, people become curious about you. When you stop chasing opportunities with desperation, opportunities start appearing. Not because the universe is rewarding you, but because your energy has fundamentally changed. The less you want, the more power you have. If this is making you see desire in a completely new way, write in the comments, "I see through the illusion." Say it like you're marking a turning point in your consciousness. Now let's talk about what happens when you actually embody this. When you genuinely begin to want nothing, the first thing you'll notice is resistance. Massive resistance. Because your entire identity has been built around wanting. Who are you without your ambitions? Your mind will tell you that wanting nothing means becoming nothing. But this is the will speaking. And when you can observe it without being controlled by it, you realize you are not your desires. You are the awareness that notices desires. And this distinction changes everything. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you want a relationship. You feel lonely. You go on dates hoping this will be the one. Every interaction is loaded with need. Schopenhauer would say this entire approach is suffering because you're operating from lack. But what happens when you genuinely stop wanting a relationship? Not as a strategy, but as a real shift where you become complete as you are. First, the desperation disappears. You stop looking at every person as a potential solution. You start to simply enjoy interactions. And people feel this shift. They sense you're not trying to get something from them. And paradoxically, this makes you far more attractive. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're genuinely no longer needy. This is the power of wanting nothing. It's a transmission of energy that happens when you're truly free from need. The same applies to career, money, success. When you desperately want a promotion, your boss feels your neediness. When you desperately want to make money, you make decisions from scarcity. But when you do your work without attachment to outcomes, when you create without needing validation, you tap into different power. You become someone who can't be controlled by external rewards. Schopenhauer observed this in artists who created not for fame, but for the work itself. In those moments, the will was suspended. They weren't wanting anything. They were simply expressing. And ironically, these often become the timeless works, because they weren't born from neediness. They were born from fullness. But here's where it becomes truly terrifying. Schopenhauer wasn't just talking about detaching from material things. He was talking about detaching from life itself. And when you go deep, you start to question everything. Why do anything if it's all just the will using you? These are the dark questions Schopenhauer didn't shy away from. And I'm suggesting you sit with that discomfort. Because in that discomfort is where real freedom lives. You are already complete. Not because you've achieved everything, but because completeness isn't something you achieve. It's what you are when you stop believing you're incomplete. This is the power of wanting nothing. It's seeing through desires, seeing they're just movements of the will. And when you see through them, they lose their grip. You can still set goals, still take action, but you're no longer enslaved by outcomes. If you're starting to feel how much of your life has been controlled by wanting, write in the comments, "I am not my desires." Say it like you're reclaiming your mind from a force that's been running it without permission. Now let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Schopenhauer gave us practices to temporarily escape the tyranny of the will. We live in a world of infinite wanting. Social media shows us everything we don't have. Advertising tells us we're incomplete. Dating apps turn connection into an endless scroll. We're being bombarded with messages designed to create wanting, and most people are drowning in it. The first practice was aesthetic contemplation. When you look at art, a sunset, a mountain, and you're simply absorbed in beauty, the will goes quiet. You're not wanting anything. You're just present, and in that presence, there's indescribable peace. But you don't need to travel far. You can practice this with anything. The way light hits a wall, the sound of rain. When you really look without wanting it to be different, you tap into freedom. The second practice is compassion, not feeling sorry for people, but seeing through the illusion of separation. Recognizing that the same will drives everyone. Everyone is trapped in wanting, trapped in suffering. When you see this, judgment falls away. You stop competing because you see the game itself is the trap. This is why people who embody wanting nothing often become generous. They're not protecting territory because they don't identify with having territory to protect. The third practice is asceticism, voluntarily choosing less. Not because you can't have more, but because you see that more doesn't solve the problem. In a world that tells you happiness is one more purchase away, choosing less is rebellion. Fast from something you usually want. Skip a meal and notice what happens in your mind. The discomfort isn't hunger. It's the will demanding to be satisfied. Sit with it. That's where you start to see how much of your wanting is automatic. But watch for the trap. Don't turn asceticism into another form of wanting. Don't want to be the person who doesn't want things. True wanting nothing isn't another achievement. It's a quiet dissolution of the self that was built on wanting. And yes, that's terrifying. Because who are you without that self? If this is shaking something loose, if you're questioning the foundation of how you've been living, write in the comments, "I choose awareness over wanting." And if this philosophy is opening doors in your mind, subscribe because we're going even deeper into ideas most people never have the courage to explore. Now the most important question. If wanting is suffering, should you stop doing anything? Quit your job? End relationships? Abandon goals? No. You don't stop doing things. You stop being enslaved by outcomes. There's a massive difference. Imagine two people building a business. The first is desperate. They need this to work. Every setback feels personal. They're anxious, reactive, exhausted. The second person puts in the same hours but isn't attached to outcome. They're doing it because the work is interesting. If it succeeds, great. If it fails, that's information. Which person makes better decisions? Which one experiences more peace? Which one is more likely to succeed? This is the power of wanting nothing. It doesn't make you passive. It makes you effective. You're no longer making decisions from desperation. You're free to pivot, adapt, see clearly. In relationships, the person who doesn't need the other to complete them creates the healthiest dynamic. Not because they don't care, but because they're not demanding the other fill an internal void. They're complete already. This is rare. Most relationships are two incomplete people trying to use each other to feel whole. And this creates endless suffering because no one can make you whole. When you get this at a cellular level, everything transforms. You still set goals but hold them lightly. You still form relationships but aren't grasping. You're using wants as tools, not being used by them. The less you want, the more you seem to receive. Not because of cosmic justice, but because your energy changes. People trust you when you're not trying to take from them. Opportunities open when you're not desperately chasing. Life flows when you're not constantly fighting what is. But there's a dark side. When you genuinely want nothing, you see how much of society is built on wanting. The entire economy depends on you being dissatisfied. When you opt out, you become dangerous to the system. Not because you're fighting it, but because you're no longer controllable through desire. And this can be isolating. Most people are still trapped in the game. When you stop playing, they don't understand. Schopenhauer himself was isolated. His philosophy was too dark, too honest. He died relatively unknown. And there's a lesson there. The path of wanting nothing is not the path to popularity. It's the path to truth. And truth is often lonely. But this loneliness isn't suffering. Because suffering comes from wanting connection. When you genuinely want nothing, even loneliness loses its sting. This is the terrifying power. It sets you free. But freedom means standing alone. It means not needing others to confirm your reality. Most people say they want freedom, but what they really want is comfort. And these are not the same. Freedom is uncomfortable, uncertain, groundless. But on the other side of that terror is something that cannot be named. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A joy that doesn't come from getting what you want. If you're beginning to sense this truth, write in the comments, "I am already free." Say it, even if you don't fully believe it yet. So here we are, at the edge. You are not your wants. You are not your goals. You are the awareness that watches all of this arise and pass away. And that awareness needs nothing. But your mind will fight this truth. Because if you're not your wants, who are you? These questions don't have comfortable answers. And Schopenhauer wasn't interested in comfort. He was interested in truth. The truth is that most of what you think matters doesn't actually matter. The promotion, the relationship, the body, the life you think you should be living. It's all just the will using you. You can keep playing that game. Most people do. Or you can see through it. Seeing through it doesn't mean you'll suddenly be happy in the conventional sense. Schopenhauer wasn't a happy person, but he was free. Free from illusions that imprison most people. Free from the belief that something external could save him. And in that freedom, there was something beyond happiness and unhappiness. A peace that exists beyond the pendulum of pleasure and pain. This is what's available when you embrace wanting nothing. Not as philosophy you think about, but as lived reality. The will to life is strong. It doesn't want you to see through it, but you have a choice. The choice to see it, to recognize it, to stop identifying with it. And when you make that choice, the grip loosens. The desperation fades. You move through life differently, not from lack, but from groundedness. You become someone who can't be manipulated through desire, someone who can't be controlled through fear of loss. This is real power. Not the power to get what you want, but the power to be okay without it. You might think this is too extreme. You have bills, people who depend on you, dreams. And you're right. You probably can't eliminate all wanting, but you can start to see through it. Notice when you're acting from desperate need versus genuine choice. Release your grip on outcomes. Be okay with things not going your way. Each time you choose awareness over grasping, you get freer. This is not a destination. It's a practice. A moment-to-moment practice of seeing clearly. Of noticing when the will drives you. Of questioning desires. Of sitting with discomfort. And when you can be with what is without needing it different, you access peace that nothing external can give or take away. So what now? You can close this video and go back to chasing what you were chasing. Most people will. Or you can sit with this. Let it disturb you. Let it question everything. Let it show you that maybe the life you've been building is built on a foundation that cannot hold. And in that realization, in that terrifying moment of seeing clearly, you might find something you weren't looking for. Something that was always here, waiting for you to stop wanting long enough to notice it. This is Schopenhauer's gift. Not optimism, not comfort, but truth. The uncomfortable, liberating, terrifying truth that wanting is suffering, and freedom comes through wanting nothing. And if you've stayed with me through this journey, if something in you recognizes this truth even though it scares you, you're already waking up. Your life will never be the same, because once you know wanting is optional, you can never fully believe in the game again. And that's both the terror and the power of wanting nothing. It destroys who you thought you were, but it reveals who you actually are. And who you actually are needs nothing, wants nothing, lacks nothing. You just forgot. And philosophy like Schopenhauer's is here to remind you. Not to make you happy, but to wake you up. If you're ready to keep exploring these depths, if you want philosophies that most people are too afraid to face, subscribe. Because we're not here for feel-good content. We're here for truth. And truth is what sets you free, even when freedom is terrifying. Welcome to the power of wanting nothing. Welcome to your life beyond desire. Welcome to what remains when everything you thought you needed falls away.